All right, so before we go on to installation, we're about to do that, we need to start by talking about the two options for how we interact with Git. We can use the terminal, a text-based interface, and we can use graphical user interfaces. So since it was originally created and still to this day, Git is largely or primarily a terminal-based tool, a text-based interface. It's used mostly by developers and has been for a long time, and most developers are comfortable using the command line. So it's not the most user-friendly experience, it's certainly not the most beautiful, but it's at the core of Git. It's what Git was really built to do originally. With that said, as Git's popularity has increased, so have a number of GUIs, graphical user interfaces, applications, pieces of software you download that make it easier, or at least more visual, more graphical, to interact with Git. There are quite a few of these different applications out there, these different GUIs, for all different platforms. Some of the more common ones are GitHub Desktop, SourceTree, Tower, GitKraken, Ungit. There's actually a whole list here on the Git website. You can see quite a few of them. Some of them are free. Some of them are not. Some of them you have to buy. Some of them are subscriptions. They have different tiers. But they all have the same goal, to help visualize and not just like visually show you stuff, but help you interact with Git using your mouse and buttons instead of using the terminal. So just as a quick example, here I have a Git project open using my terminal. If I want to see a history of all the different people who have collaborated or all the different checkpoints, here they all are. This is what it looks like in my terminal. This is a graphical user interface. It's a lot prettier. It's the exact same project. 2048 is the name of it. This is much prettier and in some ways a lot easier to understand. However, it may not be faster in all situations. For somebody who's well versed with the terminal, with the command line, who's already using it day to day, this is still fastest. It's what's most comfortable. It takes time to get to that point. And I'm not telling you, one way or the other is better, but using a terminal is going to be expected of you if you are a developer or if you plan on being a developer. And you can do things in one line of code here, one command. That might take 3 or 4 button clicks. But at the same time, this opens the doors to all sorts of people to use Git and interact with Git who aren't super command line savvy, right? This is a pretty terrible interface, objectively. So I'll just quickly run through sort of the pros and cons. Using these graphical user interfaces, there's a much lower barrier of entry. That's always great. Friendlier to use, can be a much more positive experience. And for some users who are experienced with the command line, they still may prefer the visual experience of a GUI. Now, some of the cons are that there's a lot of magic involved with the graphical user interfaces. Some of them really obfuscate or they abstract away what's happening behind the scenes. So you may not really understand what your button clicks are doing, and that can work for you 99% of the time. But then when things go wrong, it can be a problem. Also, these GUIs can lead to users being dependent on one piece of software because they do change one GUI to the next. Even if they are similar, they have different buttons, different approaches, different labels for things, different windows and all of that. So, I'm very pro GUI, to be honest with you. However, the command line has a lot going for it as well. If you can get past the fact that it's not beginner friendly, it's ugly, and it's often not the best experience if you're designing it from scratch. If you can get past those cons, it can be a lot faster once you get comfortable. There are some features that you can really only do or interact with on the command line. Git features, but also a whole bunch of other features. The commands are always going to be the same from one command line to the next, assuming you're using a Unix-based shell. It doesn't matter whose machine you're on or which machine you're on. The commands are consistent, and Git is created as a command line tool. So all the documentation, tutorials, resources, they're all oriented around the command line. So there's a lot going for both sides. Unfortunately, there's kind of a lot of gatekeeping around people using GUIs, that it's somehow lesser or you're not really using Git. It's kind of garbage. It's BS. In my opinion, we will be using both in this course, not side by side, but rather I will be teaching using the command line. That's really the assumed way of interacting with Git still to this day. If you have plans on being a developer, if you are a developer already, command line is just part of that package. You've got to know how to interact with it. So I'll be showing you how to use Git from the command line, but I'll also be illustrating concepts using a GUI. I will be translating what we do. So I'll show you, here's this one thing we can do where we make a new branch, or here's how we merge, blah, blah, blah. And then here's how you can do the same thing in a GUI. So we'll be using a GUI in particular called GitKraken. This is this lovely logo here. We will be installing it and setting it up in a video in this section. But first, we're going to install Git on our command line. So if you're on a Mac, there'll be a video for installing Git on a Mac. And if you're on a PC, there'll be a video for installing Git on a Windows machine. Alrighty, so hopefully that explains a little bit about the differences or the two ways of interacting with Git. There's the hideous but very, very common command line, ubiquitous amongst Git users. And then there's this fractured world of user interfaces, graphical user interfaces that vary quite a bit. Some of them aren't full featured, others are quite powerful, but they all have the goal of making it easier or more visual to work with Git. So we'll be using both, but primarily the command line first. And I will actually have a crash course on how to use the command line in this section as well.